Wonderful. So others of you can enjoy this, or those people who registered who couldn't attend can enjoy this. So I'll start with just simply because I'm not exactly sure of everybody's background in gifted education. A brief overview of talented and gifted learners. Many of you know are simply those children who are identified as possessing outstanding abilities or talents. And of course, in the state of Iowa, our definition is broad. It includes both general intellectual ability, but also creative thinking, leadership ability, visual spatial, performing arts, right? Sometimes you'll hear the term advanced learner or extended learner or GT or TAG, right? But it's a special group of students who deserve to be challenged, who deserve, as I said before, an education commensurate with their abilities and needs. And of course, not all school districts across the state have the resources to serve and identify in all these areas. But hopefully in your particular area, the identification system and definition of giftedness aligns with the programming and services that you are offering. So, as many of you also know, there is specific categorical funding for TAG students, for TAG education in the state, correct? So Iowa is lucky in that respect. We have a definition of gifted education in Iowa Code, but we also have money, right, tied to that. So every year, basically, just to put it simply, school districts receive money from the state, categorical aid, which they then match to a certain percentage, and then use that money and those for resources to support gifted learners. So there are specific criteria in Iowa Code, and if you're a gifted teacher, a gifted educator, coordinator, there are some do's and don'ts in terms of what funds can be used for, right? They can only be used to meet the needs beyond the regular school program. And so what does that mean? Well, hire teachers to work explicitly with talented and gifted learners, purchase educational resources targeting TAG students, right? Pay for experiential learning opportunities, field trips, again, that are part of the talented and gifted program. And of course, pay for staff development of TAG teachers, right? And many TAG teachers attend the annual conference because of that. We're very grateful for that. Over the past few years, however, as many of you know, there have been some carryover balances that have accrued. And this is just because in Iowa Code, funding for talented and gifted programs does carry over from year to year. Now, you can see there's a link in this presentation. And by the way, I will, in fact, why don't I just do this now? I'll just drop this link in the chat. Bear with me here. All right, here's a link to a Google Doc folder. This has all the resources that you'll need. I'll share it again at the end of the presentation, and I'll share it when I send out this recording as well. But included in that Google folder, you do have a copy of this presentation, and so you can click on the hyperlinks there. But also, I believe there is a spreadsheet for the fiscal 21 carryover balances. The 22 balances are coming out right now, but if you take a look at that list, you'll see that some districts do have quite a bit of money, right? That was carried over or has been carried over for several years, right? And there are different reasons for this. Some districts identify and serve more students than others, simply due to enrollment or identification practices, right? And so they spend down their money more quickly. Some districts hire more TAG teachers than others, right? And then because of that, salary and benefits, that draws down the funding as well. And then, of course, in reality, some districts understand, some district administrators understand and recognize, and some school boards recognize and value gifted and talented education more than others. And this could also be reflected in the amount of money that is spent. But over the years, it has accrued quite a bit of a balance in some districts. And so as part of the Students First Act that was passed on January 4th in this year, Division 3 of that bill, right? And you'll recall this is the quote unquote educational vouchers bill, school choice bill, which established education savings accounts for parents, allowing that per pupil expenditures to be spent at private schools or public or non-public schools. A little recognized Division 3 or paragraph in this bill targeted funding that was carried over from year to year, and it was in professional development and teacher supplement or salary, but it was also in gifted and talented funding. And prior to its passage, ITAG became aware of this, and as some of you know, because you receive information from us as an organization and being a member, we lobbied hard, we legislated hard against getting or including this Division 3 in the bill. ITAG, ISEA, School Administrators Association, ISB, all had their lobbyists declare against them. And unfortunately, the bill still passed and Division 3 was included. And so what does that mean? Well, basically it means that school districts now will receive an assigned amount of categorical aid for gifted education because nothing in code has changed. And that money will still carry over. However, districts will have the discretion, I guess would be the best word, to use what is left of that money after the fiscal year, right? So after July 1st of the fiscal year, school administrators, school boards can decide to use any unspent funds in the TAG program or a TAG categorical aid for the specific purpose of supplementing teacher salaries. And so what does that look like? Well, that could be salary bumps for teachers, that could be hiring bonuses, that could be retention bonuses. Really, it's up to the discretion of school boards and school administrators in terms of how they use it. So, of course, this concerns ITAG because we do represent gifted learners across the state, gifted educators across the state. And we could envision a future where those districts who understand and value the needs of gifted learners will continue to spend their allotments accordingly. And those districts who may not, especially those who don't understand talented and gifted learners, or maybe the need for specialized programming, maybe even those who have biases against, or consider such programming as elitist, or think that, TAG learners will be just fine on their own, right? We worry that these TAG funds will be, sat on and left to be spent for other purposes, right? And so the reason why we're holding events such as these, the reason why we are putting out position statements on our website and sending them to our membership and asking them to share with others is because, we want people to be aware of how these changes in TAG funding could really have a negative impact on gifted education. So what might that impact be, right? Well, we could imagine districts who may just decide to reduce their TAG programs and services just to a bare minimum, and then of course make cuts to TAG staffing, offer fewer programs and services, specialized educational opportunities, right? And of course, this would have a severe impact on the effectiveness of TAG education in the state, the effectiveness of TAG teachers, the reach of TAG teachers in their districts. It's definitely going to restrict access to gifted programming in those districts that choose to not spend this money on all gifted learners. And it's personally, I think it's going to undercut Iowa's reputation as a leader in the field of gifted education. As I said before, we are a state that has a proud tradition of having both a definition and funding attached to gifted programming. And so, by having in Iowa law right now, having a caveat where districts can choose to spend the talented and gifted funding on other resources, I think that undercuts our reputation personally. And so that's why we're here, right? And that's why we need you It's because we need people who understand that gifted learners have specialized needs. And so we are calling to action, right? We're calling you to action. And there are some three or four things that we would like you to do. And the second part of this presentation, I'm going to go into specifics in terms of how you might do this. But first of all, we're hoping that you can educate others about gifted and talented learners and the need for programs and services. Also voice your concerns at school board meetings, ask to meet with superintendents, with school principals to talk about gifted education. And of course, share our position statement, which is linked in this presentation, but also provided in the handouts. So before I get into kind of the how-to and share some additional resources that you might be able to use in this effort, I do want to take a moment to see if there are any questions. Feel free to drop them in the chat or raise your hand and I'll take any questions.
Do we know if they've named someone at the Department of Ed to cover giftedness since Roseanne left? I'm kind of out of the loop on that one.
Yes, Molly McConnell will be starting as the new gifted and talented coordinator at the Department of Education. I believe she is wrapping up her school year now, but she will be taking over for Roseanne Malik. Yes.
And do we know if the Department of Ed has any plans to track how districts are using these funds, or is it just theirs to do with as they please and the state doesn't care?
Well, in a recent task force meeting, Molly McConnell was there, and so the state was represented. This was held at the Heartland AEA last month, and I was there as well. And so I did express our concerns about this. So the state is aware in terms of, Brett, whether or not they have a plan to follow up and add that accountability piece, right? To districts, or ensure that districts are spending the money. I'm not exactly sure. That's a great question for Molly once she begins in June.
Thank you.
You bet. Any other questions? Says here in the chat, what does it mean if a school has a zero balance, but it does not appear to offer any services at all? That's a great question. And I would say that's a call for advocacy, right? I would wonder where that money is going, first of all. And I would make sure to reach out to the school, not just the school administrators, but also the school board to see what that money is being spent on if programming and services are non-existent. That's disappointing if that's true. So
Todd, can you hear me okay?
I can, yes.
Hi everyone. There are school districts that have very low population. If maybe they have under 500 students. And you and I have talked about this. If they have a low tax base, if they have few students, for the overall population, it shouldn't matter how many are identified. The formula is based on the total population of the district. It's very possible that whatever money comes from the state, I think it's 75 from the state, 25 from the district. You can find that formula on iowa.gov, just search gifted and talented. Anyway, it's very possible that that money is eaten up by that teacher's salary. So you might find that. So just, for anyone who's questioning that the $0 amount, I agree, it's very suspicious. Maybe start out by asking, make sure you have your questions ready to go and ask before assuming too much.
Thank you, Lori. Yeah, I wasn't sure exactly in terms of doesn't appear to offer any services, and you do want to not make assumptions, right? It could be that that all that money is going to the salary of the tag teacher, tag coordinator for the district, and that's how service is being provided. So again, a meeting, questions, investigating further, I think is the best way to pursue that. So, other questions before I move on? Just trying to give people access here who are last minute attendees. All right. Well, do feel free to post any additional questions in the chat, and I will try and answer them as I go. So, so as I said, this change in funding is concerning because of the possible impact it could have on gifted education. And so, we are asking people from around the state who care about gifted education to help advocate. And so, part of that, part of what I'd like to share is some tools for you to use in order to do that. I would recommend starting off with, if you are not a practitioner or in the field of gifted education yourself, then do make sure to educate yourself about talent and gifted education, right? ITAG is a affiliate member of NAGC. And so, it's a wonderful organization that has a tremendous amount of resources. And as you can see linked in this slide here, they have everything from, definitions of what gifted education is to the why, right? And why gifted education is important. In preparing for your advocacy, I would also do some research and prepare to ground your argumentation in research. And so if you're going to be advocating for anything, obviously, in today's climate, research-based and data-driven schools, it's good to provide that background and have that support. So NAGC is a wonderful organization for that. Again, there's a link to NAGC and some research that you could use or cite, right, in your own, in building your argumentation, basically. So I'd also recommend taking a look. Lori mentioned Iowa Code. It would be great to take a look at the Iowa Department of Education's page. They have not just definitions of giftedness and how to serve gifted learners, right? Best practices in serving gifted learners, but they also have the code that is there, which if you are you concerned about gifted money or gifted education and money going to that, you can see here that they have the Iowa Code listed and it's detailed, and you can cite that. I would encourage you to cite that in your argumentation, right? Because all schools are required to serve gifted learners and all schools receive money for that purpose. There's strength in numbers, right? NAGC, who I just mentioned, put out a wonderful series of articles a few years ago that by Julia Link Roberts and Tracy Ford Inman, two kind of leaders in the field of gifted. And, they talked about, in addition to, how to advocate, the first thing they mention is there's strength in numbers. The schools respond to more than one or three people reaching out, right? And if you want to be heard, you have to get others involved in your cause. And so do try and, we encourage you to find those kindred spirits, find people who understand, to recognize and value gifted education, and get yourselves organized. Do that background research on what gifted education is, what the Iowa Code says, how funding is spent, right? Check out resources like NAGC's gifted advocacy page, where they talk about how to start being an advocate for gifted children, but also how to advocate at the state level. And then once you have your people, start to craft your message. Again, from those series of articles by Julia Link Roberts and Tracy Ford Inman, they talk about making sure you're clear, right? And not just clear, but you're positive, right? There's what's the expression? You get more flies with honey, right? So, the message that you communicate should be positive, should be, you're working in the best interest of gifted learners. You want the best for gifted children, but also persuasive. And so in this slide is linked some effective speaking and communication techniques. I'm assuming you'd want to make some logical and emotional or ethical appeals. You definitely want to reference Iowa code that requires talented and gifted education, right? You'll definitely want to craft your message so that it's tied to policy, and it's research-based and supportive and it's persuasive. And so, what might that look like? Well, I've just crafted a couple sample messages here. Feel free to use these, by the way, in your own advocacy work, but you could take the approach that because, okay, we recognize that Students First Act does value districts and allow districts greater discretion to use categorical funding for talented and gifted to supplement teacher salary pay. You really hope that the school district was going to make the right choice, right? And so that ethical appeal and continue to provide talented and gifted education that's in the district, education that's commensurate to their needs. Or you could say something to the effect as all schools are required to serve gifted and talented learners. We hope our district will remain tag code compliant, right? And use all of its categorical aid to fund talented and gifted education for that purpose. So again, making that ethical, making that emotional appeal, maybe making that legal appeal and reminding administrators, reminding school board members that this is in code, in Iowa code. And then after you've done your research, right, and prepare your message, I'd ask to meet. You might want to take a look at the unspent funds, and one of the questions you might want to ask, as was alluded to earlier, is so how does our district spend this money? What does it go to? Right? Because you don't want to make assumptions just because a district has a zero balance or just because it has a balance of $100,000 or $200,000, right? But it is a question you should ask about. And so that's why we did provide the link there to the categorical aid. That's available on the Iowa Department of Education website every year, by the way, and it's public information. And so, as I said before, the fiscal year 2022 is in the process of coming out. They didn't have everything listed there, but do look for that. Some other questions you might want to ask your school administration would be, so where do we go from here? Now that Iowa, law requires that schools serve talented and gifted learners, what is our school district doing to ensure that we are staying compliant for that purpose? Again, how much carryover funding does our district have, and how are we going to spend that? I will say that for this particular year, school districts can already start using the leftover funds, right? And so that was built into the language of Division 3. And so any unspent money from 2021, districts can now use and spend down for that purpose of supplementing teacher salary. And so in the future, they'll have to wait till July 1st, but it's important to ask, now that we have maybe this pot of money, how is it going to be spent, right? In the handouts that I have provided in the Google folder, here is a flyer you might want to use or send as a follow-up, or send to educate others about the types of questions you might want to ask. And again, it's that are we tag compliant, right? Tag code compliant. What's our funding look like? What's our staffing look like? What do our programming and services look like? And what does our future look like? What is gifted education going to look like now that the legislation has changed and we now have greater discretion? Hopefully nothing will change, right? But it might take somebody advocating for that to happen. There's, of course, power in attending school board meetings. I know school boards are wrapping up and probably only have a few meetings left in the year. But it would probably benefit you, since schools are already spending down the reserves. It might benefit you to get on the docket for that. Again, educate yourself about the issue and prepare your notes, prepare your message. But if you can, sign up for that next school board meeting, and state why you're there, state what your concerns are, and basically call for the district to continue to spend down its money completely from year to year. A wonderful follow-up maybe to school board members who might not have as much background in gifted education is this handout that ITAG created several years ago and was just recently updated. It's basically how school board members can make a difference in a gifted and talented child's life, right? And as you can see, there are bullet points, they're talking points, and this is explicitly targeted towards school board members who, again, might or might not have any background knowledge in gifted education or the needs of gifted learners. And so another resource for you to use, please share far and wide. Please follow up after you attend a school board meeting or have a meeting with an administrator with this resource. And then finally, other things you can do, making other people aware, family, friends, community members, right? Offering maybe personal or local examples of success of why we need talented and gifted education. If you're a parent of a gifted child, where your child would be if that didn't exist, right? But the more personal, obviously, the argument that you can make, the better. And then, if possible, because there are strength in numbers, form a TAG advocacy group, right? A parent group, an educator group in your local community. There are resources, again, in the Google folder of how to start a parent group or how to start an educator group, how to coordinate events. And of course, ITAG can help you with that, right? We are a resource to you. NAGC is a resource to you. And so, we encourage you to reach out and to ask us if you have any questions. And so with that said, I will just open the floor up to questions. First of all, I'll take a look at the chat here. Lori, did you want to articulate your thought or share your thought with the group?
Hi, everyone. Well, I'm not sure I have much to say more than what I put in the chat, but well-meaning educators will sometimes say, well, why don't we just enrich everyone? Why do we even need a TAG program? Those shouldn't be counter issues. At least they aren't in my mind. I mean, you could still have an enrichment model to bring up all kids. That's a great thing. But we work here in the state of Iowa. We have a very strong code. Our code is based on the research and the work that is behind gifted education, and that is that gifted children need services commensurate with their needs. There is so much verbiage around identification. How do we identify? How do I identify? Should we do this? Should we do that? Whatever. And then what happens with services? Identify for what you're going to serve. And we want to make sure that the students in our state get what they should be getting. And that is a dedicated, trained person working with those students in a program that is designed to differentiate for those students' needs. So, I could go on and I won't, but thank you for allowing me the time to just say a little bit more about that. The iowa.gov website is amazing. If you go in and take a look at that, just search gifted and talented, you'll find all kinds of things just on the very first page. If you scroll down and links to specific parts of the code that talk about identification and about services. Thanks, Todd.
And Todd, not to be the more of a comment than a question guy, but because of the changes with open enrollment and the fact that private schools aren't required to provide gifted services, that can be a tack you take when talking to a school board for why they need to fund gifted education appropriately. It's something that not only are they obligated to do it by code, but it provides a service that their competitors might not. And I hate that in Iowa right now we have to consider schools in competition with each other, but that's the world we live in. So use what tactics you have to get what you need for your kid.
Definitely. It's that element of persuasion, right? Yeah, it was interesting. I was in conversation with a administrator, district level administrator recently who who went to the higher ups and really said, you know, what are you going to do? You've got this pot of money. Are you going to make the ethical choice? And as a result of that, they've been able to hire several gifted coordinators for their district. And so making that emotional appeal, you know, selling it, right? That these are services that maybe another district doesn't have, right? Is definitely a way to go, right? So thank you, Brett. Other comments or questions?
One comment that I would throw out there, just Kyra Wilcox Conley, I'm a GT consultant or a GT person at Heartland AEA. And as I'm out and about in schools, I think one of the things that concerns me that I'm hearing is this sort of lack of understanding about what that funding can be spent on, because I do hear people saying, well, we can just spend it on whatever we want. No, it's specified, but that's circulating out and about. So that misunderstanding is certainly present and needs all of the advocacy that Todd just provided you with resources to make sure that people really understand that. Then the second comment related to that is because TSS is the identified way to spend down those funds if they're not being used on GT programs, is that puts it on the table for negotiations in schools. And so that's just another piece of this sort of complicated puzzle to keep in your minds as you're looking at what's going on in your district. So just be aware of that component of it as well.
Right. So supplementing teacher salaries, right? And possibly retention bonuses, hiring bonuses, whatever the case may be. There's also that element of, well, I mean, that sounds fantastic, right? Don't we want to do that? But at what cost, right? Other comments or questions? Well, I really do hope that if you have any, you reach out. Again, I have provided a link to all the resources, including the presentation itself. Do take a look at them. Do ask me if you have any questions. Again, Kyra, that piece about what can these funds be spent on, that's in the slides, right? And so being explicit and making sure people are educated about that. It's not a free-for-all, right? Where this money or how this money can be used. That's an important component of it. So.
Okay.
Is it acceptable for participants, whether here or viewing later on, to share the PowerPoint and the resources as widely as they wish to?
Yes, please.
Okay.
It looks like I just had the presentation itself, but I'll make sure that I provide the Google link drive as well to that to everything. So, and I will be sending out a copy, the recording of this this presentation. So feel free to share that included. All right. Well, wonderful. Well, I appreciate you spending some time with us tonight. Again, reach out if you have any questions. Otherwise, please advocate for your gifted child in your area. They really need your support. So have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For those of us who weren't able to get on at the very beginning for one reason or another, can you kind of go through the first of it again? It was very difficult to figure out how to get on this.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah,
Yes.
because I'm interested.
I recorded the conversation, the entire presentation. So I'm going to stop that now.
Yeah.